Hi guys, and welcome to the first video, planning your season. Pretty excited to start dumping these ideas down on video. Remember, we've got six parts. This is part number 1, and it's not going to be the tiny details, but it's going to give you a broad overview, some ideas to think about that you can start implementing into the way you train, the way you perceive competitive CrossFit, and that's going to help you ultimately become a better athlete. Okay, so this video is about planning your season. A lot of people don't plan their season, or in the past haven't planned their seasons, and it's bitten them in the ass. One story, a fellow friend in Australia, absolutely on paper has the numbers to be competing at regionals. So yeah, the stats are all down there. Competitively, because obviously the stats on paper is nothing if you can't carry it into competition. Competitively as well, regional caliber, without a shadow of a doubt. The only reason he didn't qualify for regionals was because he timed his season wrong. Okay, hopefully he won't make that mistake in the future and he'll be there. But this is pretty much what happened. We've got 1 year, okay, 12 months. It's rough. You know, if you do qualify for regionals and then the next event would potentially be the Open, that would maybe turn into 9 months. But this is a year, okay, so it's one macro cycle. On the other axis, we've got our level of fitness. Okay, so this is the start level of fitness, this is the end level of fitness. And what I'm gonna sort of explain on this graph is what a lot of people do, what they're doing correctly, what they should be doing, and little things along the way that don't really serve them. So anyway, this is, I'll get back to my friend from Australia really soon, but this is what most people do, okay? This is what most people do. This might be their starting level of fitness, okay? Let's just put a green dot here. And within the 12 months, they do CrossFit training, whatever it might be, following a program at their gym, and this is how their year looks. Cool. They get to their competition at the end of the year or the end of their macro cycle, whatever their sort of major goal is for that 12-month period, and they've got fitter. It's fantastic, and they've got consistently fitter the whole way through. Okay, which is not a bad way to do it, but there is a better way to do it. And so I'm going to use the red. So this is what we should be doing. We'll start at the same level of fitness, okay? But remember, this is your level of fitness, not necessarily how much you can lift, how fast you can run, but overall, if you were to do a CrossFit competition at any stage along the year, that would be a gauge of your results, okay? This is what would be a little bit better. So you can see as the season progresses, you are not really CrossFit shape. You're working on your weaknesses, whatever it might be. And then as you come closer to the time of competition, you start to build up and peak. And then when the time of competition comes, you are fitter than you would have been, overall fitter than you would have been, if you had just trained CrossFit all through the season. And some of you might think this is common sense, yet work on your weaknesses in the off season. But what does that look like, and what should and shouldn't you be doing? So in the next video we're going to talk about intensity, and the video after that we're going to talk about volume. This is about volume, about how we spend our energy during different parts of the season. Okay? So now I'll go back to my friend from Australia. He should have been up at this level, okay, peaking hard, but this is what happened to him. This is the blue. Alrighty, he peaked too soon. He did a CrossFit competition like a month before the Open, destroyed it, absolutely destroyed it, and then was flat as a pancake leading into the Open, okay, and underachieved. And just for that one reason, he didn't make his ultimate goal, which is regionals, okay? Now, this brings me on to my next point, which is competing through the season, competing through the year. It's something, as a whole, I recommend against. And the hard thing is that it's fun. It's fun to compete. We all like to compete. We're all, if we're doing CrossFit, we're pretty competitive natured people. But the thing with competition is, one, it stunts your training. Okay, so say you are gonna compete and you're gonna take it semi-seriously. You're gonna need to taper your training leading into the comp. Then you've got, let's say, 2 days of just bashing yourself, and then you'd take probably at least a week to recover. So ultimately, we've lost about a month of training. We've tapered, we've had the comp, we've recovered. So that's, let's say, 2 weeks gone, but that's also 2 weeks you've fallen behind. So it's almost 4 weeks gone. So 2 weeks less of training and 2 weeks that you've fallen behind. And that's just from doing one competition semi-seriously. The only time I would compete is if it fits into the big picture. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you are not a good aerobic athlete, during this time here, from around here to here, when we're working on our weaknesses, I would do competitions involved with aerobic training. So it might be triathlon, it might be running, 10K running, it might be erg stuff. You might want to do maybe 2 competitions in that 9-month period that involve that. So one, it gives you something to work towards. You're still competing, but mainly it's working on your weakness in a competitive environment. So you can see if your training is paying off through competition. So like I said, you won't be at your fittest during this time, but you'll be working at your weaknesses and making them a lot fitter. Same for someone who's not strong potentially. During this first 9 months, I would compete at powerlifting, at weightlifting, but again, maybe just 1 or 2 times during that 9-month period. Reason being is because, like I said, you've got to taper for the comp and recover, and that's potential training time. So if you're doing sort of 4 or 5 competitions in a 9-month period, you're actually losing a lot of training time, because we have to remember that competing and training are 2 different things, okay? Training is getting the body ready for the test. Competing is the test, okay? Back in the day of CrossFit, you'd go into the box, you'd do the workout, which was ultimately a test because you're putting your times up, you're seeing where you place, but it was also training. And that's the beauty of normal CrossFit, but competitive CrossFit has to be treated differently. We all know this. We all know this. So that is how the first sort of 9 months should be. We shouldn't really be doing CrossFit competitions. The only time I would be doing CrossFit competitions is if you are not good at CrossFit. Now don't confuse this, because if you dissect where you're bad and you have weaknesses, work on your weaknesses. If you dissect where you're bad, say you're really strong, you're pretty aerobically fit, you can cycle a barbell well, but maybe when it comes to competition, maybe anxiety gets the better of you, or nerves get the better of you, something. So you need to expose yourself to more competition, okay? And once again, I would use this time to test the theory. And we've done it with athletes before. We've said, hey, during this time, let's do a CrossFit competition. And some of them have been quite high caliber athletes, and a bit of their ego, they want to do well in the competition, but we've said number 1 rule, 0 expectation. About placing podium, 0 expectation, okay? What your goal is during this competition, say for example someone, when they don't do so well in a workout, that their expectations aren't met and it brings them down for, I don't know, the rest of the competition, they're just not quite there, they're thinking about what they could have done different, there's a massive flaw in your competitive skill. If you don't do well, you get no rep, whatever it is, you hit a time cap when in training you came in under the time cap, and that gets you down, that right there is retracting from your ability to compete well. So that is something you need to practice. And we've done it before. We've had athletes that have been hung up, and you just start giving them little mantras or little things for their mindset, which we'll touch in video number 5. To start making them overcome those hurdles, so that next time they compete, they might not do well in a workout, but it won't have as big as an effect. Just give them 10 minutes to rant about it, whatever it is, but then they have to get over it and do the best for the remainder of the competition, the weekend, whatever it is. So that is why I would have CrossFit competitions in here, is to let people practice CrossFit, not necessarily physically, but mentally, the hurdles they're going to hit at competition, whether it is that anxiety, etc., etc. The one time I would also do a CrossFit competition is around this mark here, and that's just to see where they're at. Let's enter a CrossFit competition, see if all of this training on your weaknesses has helped your weakness. So if we go to an example again, weightlifting. We've trained weightlifting this whole time, competition comes up, I don't know, you come last in the competition, who cares? But on the weightlifting, you hit an all-time PR on the ladder, and then there's a heavy metcon and you place second or third. Bam, that's a win, okay? Ultimately, you came last in the comp, but your goal has been achieved. Cool, and that's takes quite a strong athlete to drop their ego and do it for those reasons. But once you are doing it for the right reasons, over that 12-month period when it all comes together, you're going to be a lot more in a much better place to compete well. So that's the season, and then we start ramping stuff up, and that's where you'd say people are doing more traditional CrossFit, open style workouts, whatever it may be, leading into that peak. So that's what we like to do, the red line, peak at the right time. If you compete during the season, not a great idea. You'll start to undulate with highs and lows, too much time tapering, recovering, not a good way to do it, okay? And that's potentially, that might happen on the green line CrossFitting competition. By the time you get to the end, not as good as you could have been. The blue line is, again, peaking at the wrong time. Definitely something that I've seen crush tons of people. It's probably the most common reason people don't make it to regionals. On paper, statistics are great. Competitions through the season, do amazing. Comes to the open or regionals, crash and burn because they don't know how to time their season properly, okay? And so when it comes to Underground RX and the way we do this, we follow this through our methodology, our principles. All of our athletes are recommended to work on their weaknesses during this time. If they're following the athlete program, there's weightlifting, hypertrophy, cardio, and gymnastics at this stage for them to really become specialized in that area, to work on these bad areas. We also obviously recommend that athletes do competitions throughout this time, and we provide guidelines on tapering for that. And then when it comes to ramping up, we start to bias the training less and less. So less and less of the specialty work, more and more of the traditional CrossFit work. Okay, and that's all part of, the program that we offer and what we do. So as far as an athlete would go, okay, if you don't have a coach that helps you with this, if you don't have a coach, as far as an athlete goes, for some things to think about, through let's say 9 months, just for argument's sake, it might be more, it might be less, but this period of time is how long you think, because you don't have a coach to tell you, how long you think it's going to take you to get, you're balanced, your capacity, your strength, your skill, for you to be feeling whole, okay, and balanced, because that's what you want ultimately on game day or game week or months for the open. However long that period of time is, minus that out of your training cycle, and then this block is what you have to work with as an athlete. Now, the golden rule during this time is not to burn out. You see all these people, they might have finished a big competition here, whether it's, a lot of people, they finish the CrossFit Games, and if they don't have a coach, or they're a bit of a rookie, or if they finish regionals, they'll just jump into training head first. Next year I'm going to smash it. They've got all this built up energy, and by the time, it wouldn't even take long, they'll just start feeling flat mid-season, okay? Real common. And even for coached athletes, a lot of athletes just want more and more, they think more is better, right? And as a coach, you try and hold them back to a degree so they don't burn out, but they might not listen for whatever reason, and your job as a coach is to make them understand this, okay? But as an athlete, the golden rule in here is don't burn out. Work on things in your training program that are not traditional CrossFit, okay? Depending on you might want to do maybe 1 to 3 metcons a week, maybe, depending on volume and intensity, depending on volume, which we'll talk about in video 3. Intensity should always be high. But the other things you want to work on are things a little bit more isolated. So once again, let's talk about not just weightlifting or strength, or say you suck at handstand push-ups, doing strict handstand push-ups, yes, absolutely, that should all be done in isolation in specific ways to, when will we talk about this? Not sure if we will. Specific ways to build those things. You know, there are little training techniques, whether if you're bodybuilding, for example, if you know any bodybuilders, they'll do a drop set, so they'll do reps with a weight, drop the weight to a lighter one, do more reps, drop it again, do without rest. That's called a drop set. It's one way to get overload, and overload is what we want to cause stress adaptation to get fitter. You know, you could do that if you suck at your handstand push-ups, you could do that as well. So it might be strict handstands on a deficit, drop the deficit more, drop the deficit more. Again, it's just ways to create overload. And as an athlete, this is what we need to be doing, overloading our weaknesses just the right amount so that we can cause adaptation and get better. But here's another thing we really need to be doing during that time, which is a lot of skill work, technique work, dialing it in. Because when we start ramping it up, you don't really have time to really focus on technique work. There will be days where you undulate your training and you do deload as such, and then you might work on speed as opposed to, you know, strength or whatever it is. But during this time, that's when we get better at things we've never done before. Give yourself exposure to things. You know, the most fun thing would be training for the games, because you need to expose yourself to everything. So if you're a games level athlete, you know, this is the time you need to be getting on the mountain bikes, doing the paddleboarding. You see everyone doing it here. And for a rookie going into the games potentially through here, you know, tweaking it, peaking it. But if you can gain skill, I'm not saying do it every day, but gain skill during this time, because there's not a huge amount of intensity with skill work, you can start putting that in here. Whether it's strongman, odd objects, I think we're gonna see a lot of dumbbell stuff, and that's what we need to start doing in here. Triple unders, when are they gonna come at, you know, the games or regionals? If you can't do, you know, 30 triple unders unbroken and you're around that regional level, you got to watch out, because they're going to pop up soon. And if you haven't practiced that skill and you can't do it, there goes your game spot, okay? Or if you're heading to the games, you know, there goes your top 10 finish, just because you haven't simply practiced a skill during the off season. Cool? Now, as a coach, this is where it's our job to build it into the athlete's program, okay? So once again, if you're in the off season, you're working on things in sort of isolation, so whether it's your weightlifting, your gymnastics, and you're immersing yourself in that mindset, as a coach, we are prescribing that stuff, but we also need to start building in the skill work without intensity. Start building new skills for these athletes, okay? So once again, if they come into a competition, we can't expect them to do well, and we shouldn't, and we really shouldn't be encouraging them to compete. But what they will be doing is getting extremely skillful, extremely good at their weaknesses, so that when we start to ramp it up here, there's that, what was the open workout? It was maybe 17.3, 17.4, squat snatches and chest to bar pull-ups, okay? High skill and high load workout. We shouldn't be doing that during this time here. If you know what I mean, we shouldn't be doing it in a workout environment during this time. That's the test. That comes during the testing and maybe conditioning towards the testing. What we should be doing here is getting our squat snatch really strong and getting our chest to bar volume up and our efficiency up. So, you know, it might be skill work. Say it's an EMOM, for example, of 10 reps on 1 minute and, well, let's say something else on the other minute, whatever it is. And then build the total volume to over 100 reps, because a lot of the people in that workout were doing that many reps, okay? So we need to have total volume higher, and then when we come to building the intensity in, the body can tolerate the intensity because we've had the volume, okay? And this will come in the next 2 videos of volume intensity. But that's what we want to be doing here. We want to be getting those snatches strong. Building the skill work in isolation. It's pretty much doing most things in isolation with a bit of conditioning or Metcon throughout the week. And it's funny, I recently started working with an athlete and I kept saying, well, we're not going to be doing much CrossFit. And she was like, what do you mean? She's like, I heard Louis Simmons from Westside Barbell say say the same thing. You know, if you're training for competitive CrossFit, it should be something, I can't remember what he said, but like 80% of it should be accessory work, 10%, 20% should be CrossFit. And she said, I've heard someone else say that, and she said, you know, what I just said. And that's the truth. During this time, we should be doing accessory work, and I started giving her a ton of accessory work. Very imbalanced athlete. Not as in like, oh, she could snatch lock, but she wasn't good at running. I mean, some muscles in her body were so underdeveloped, they were causing her pain, right? So literally the lats weren't working. Everything she did was like this, jacked up. Her traps were just so tight and giving her head pain and, you know, little niggles and injuries through her neck. And so I went, right back to basics and gave the foundational work to build that human into, like base, absolute base. Like your body's not even working properly. This is someone who's very close to regionals and their body is not even working properly. Massive problem in CrossFit, okay? This is where we address it. Right now, tons of accessory work, literally going to a Globo gym and bodybuilding, hypertrophy. You feel the muscle, you have that good mind muscle connection, you build some mass there, some more muscle fibers, so that when it comes to, if it is ring dips or bench pressing, or even she had problems with the pegboard, she's actually got some muscles that work. Okay, and this is the time, coaches, we need to be giving that to our athletes. Okay, also if little things are going wrong, you might have athletes that are, when they squat, they favor one side, something's not firing properly, or don't know quite how to hinge correctly. Accessory work, because you cannot build this peak if you don't have a strong foundation, okay? So this is our foundation building. If their body's stable, balanced, and I mean that by muscles, it's not rotated, the hips aren't out, something like that, then we can start building in to the next level, which is the bigger picture of the weightlifting, the gymnastics, the cardio, okay? So first it has to be about healthy body, alignment, balance. If that's there, if the body is functioning right, then we can start adding in, okay, now you need to be doing, predominantly strength training for this period of time, or predominantly running, okay? If you do it the other way around, something is gonna break, okay? Someone's gonna get hurt. So it needs to follow this hierarchy of that health and balance, and then adding in the isolated movements, building up their weaknesses. And then once those two are done, you've got a pretty strong athlete in isolation. That is the only time we can really peak an athlete to compete well. Otherwise, what happens is we start adding Metcon intensity, okay? So this has been intense because that's where they get better. But this is like CrossFit intense. And if something isn't right, if you haven't given them a lot of the right volume through here, something is going to break. Something is going to break, injuries, niggles, whatever it is, you'll find out when you start to get ready for a competition, or you're at a competition and someone breaks. All the pec tears that happened at regionals was a bit of an embarrassment, to be fair. If you were doing eccentric loaded reps to get the tendon strong, things like that, it's not going to happen. You're not going to have those problems. So I would say to a few of those people that had those problems, somewhere along the line there's an imbalance. And I mean at the fundamental level. They might be a balanced CrossFitter with the, like we say, running, weightlifting, all that stuff, but at the level below that, is their body aligned and healthy? Are their tendons strong? You see a lot of guys and their muscles are too big for their tendons, and something's going to pop soon. I think that's probably why it was only guys that, started ripping. It was just these, and bigger, heavy dudes. If you had a healthy foundation, once you add intensity, no dramas, okay? You might get a very, very rare one for some odd reason, but ultimately it has to follow that hierarchy, and it has to happen during this time. So I'm just going to summarize that again. It's got to follow the hierarchy of health, okay? Health, alignment, mechanical, everything working well. After that, we can start working on the macro, the bigger things. So, the weightlifting, the cardio in isolation, and then, and only then, can we start to add the intensity building up to a competition. Okay, and that's our job as a coach, to make sure we're doing that for our athletes. So that's going to wrap up this first video. The next video is another one I'm really looking forward to doing, which is on how to get intensity. It's crucial that we get intensity, because you know, you take the body somewhere it's never been before, the body freaks out and goes, well, we don't want to be caught out again, and it adapts. Okay, so intensity is how we get the adaptation, the specific adaptation we want. So that's the next video. So yeah, stay tuned. It'll be coming out to you soon. Look out for it, and I will catch you guys shortly.